the nervous system lab, the words that are in bold, that's the stuff you'll be tested on. So instead of doing a list, I already had this made up, this is what I used for my other class, so I just did that and changed it a little bit for you guys. So lobes of the brain, those are the easy ones. So frontal, in the front, parietal, one on each side, and then temporal by the ear, and occipital lobe on the back side. So same areas that the skull would be around. So these, the central sulcus, in some brains it can be really easy to find, in some brains it's hard to find. Let's see how the last one was. So usually I look for a line that starts at the top and goes all the way down to about here. So like obviously this one here, that would not be the central sulcus. I would say this one could be, or central sulcus, to me I would say that's a better representation of it because it looks a little bit deeper. That's gonna separate frontal from parietal. So central sulcus separates frontal lobe from parietal lobe. In this one, I think it's here. So I will try to pick a model that represents it the best. On some of the, do I have any pictures of colorful ones? I guess not. And some of the animated ones, like back in the lecture, some of them are color-coded, so you can tell that frontal is one color, parietal is a different color, so that sulcus in between it is the central sulcus. But I'll try to pick a more obvious one than a brain that's really hard to figure out where it is. So once you locate that central sulcus, look for the gyrus in front of it and the gyrus behind it. The gyrus in front of it, so if here's the central sulcus, the gyrus in front of it is going to be your precentral gyrus, and that does motor or sensory? Motor. And the gyrus behind it is going to be your postcentral gyrus, so that does sensory. Any questions with those?
So like, it's like a whole band, right?
The
That
sulcus
goes
is like a groove.
Yeah, but then like the pre-central gyrus, then you would just like chunk out that band in front of
Yep,
it.
I would like highlight this whole gyrus in front of it.
Okay.
Or
All the way
highlight
down to
the gyrus behind it. So yeah, it will pretty much go from, top to bottom. Longitudinal fissure is the fissure or groove that separates the two hemispheres, the left and right hemisphere. So this view shows it, view from the top of the brain would also show it very well, like in the lecture it's in there. On the underside, the olfactory bulb, it's hard to see just with these lights on, but you can see this, in this picture's, I believe the one right from lecture 2. So the olfactory bulbs go up here, and then there's an extension on it, that's the olfactory bulb actually. This part here is called the olfactory tract. So the enlarged parts at the end are the actual bulb parts. That's what sends those nerve fibers down through that curviform plate, and that senses the chemicals that come up into your nose. So olfactory bulb is here and here. It's hard to see with the lights in here, but I think on your computers you can see it probably in the picture even. And again, it's in your lecture handout as well as this one. The optic, can anybody pronounce that better than I can? That's how I say it too, so I guess I'm not saying it wrong. I always feel like I'm saying it wrong when I say it. My northern Wisconsin accent gets me a lot. Optic chiasma, it's the crossing, so it's the X shape. It's for the optic nerve as it sends signals back into the brain, into the olfactory
Question just on like general manifest, so previous classes, like you have everything you need to know as like a bank and then you test on some, is that how you do it or do you test on everything? That you
No,
do?
it'll be some, because there's only 25 questions
Oh,
and there's a
25.
lot of
Right,
material.
right, I didn't know if you had like some questions or if you just on everything.
I think there's time for probably like lab review too, and I might narrow it down a little bit from what you have to know now anyways, but at least now, if I give you a bunch of stuff, you'll actually learn it, and then focus your attention on it a little less later. Hold my secret. Diencephalon structures, I don't know how good the models are here, so these might be more picture-based, because they can be kind of hard to see on certain models, they can be really crappy. Others can be really good, so it just depends on the models, and I haven't looked at them quite yet.
In our first, like the body structure class, she used one of the models and like had an arrow pointing, the model like moved. And like she kept showing us, but the whole class didn't get it because we kept saying diencephalon and she was looking for like the specific, I think it was hypothalamus is what she was looking for, but it was like, there's too much
It's the same thing,
moving
but-
and, yeah.
So if you notice when I said, all structures are in bold, you have to know, so this is not in bold, so it provides you just as a reference of what structures you're gonna look at. So diencephalon will not be an option on the test, so therefore there should be no confusion on that way. So these are the ones you have to know of it. But it's hard sometimes. I try to do more of the extremes versus like the in-between, if I try to label like here, is it, the bottom, is that thalamus, hypothalamus, I try to do the extremes of it so you know which one is which. So what I use as a guide is this round thing you see sticking up. I call that thalamus. It might be a little bit bigger than that, but that's, in this picture, that's what I use as a guide in. You can see this is a raised part here. That, if I have an arrow pointing to that, is thalamus. If I have, and on a picture like this, I could highlight this whole area in the stalk of that, and then that would be hypothalamus, because it's below the thalamus, and it leads into that stalk that goes into that pituitary gland there. So hypothalamus would be kind of this area underneath the thalamus, and then part of that stalk, that infundibulum. Pituitary gland, you'll probably see, on this section, but also like endocrine section, they'll probably be on both of them. So we're learning one gland for both things. So pituitary gland sits in the sella turcica, which is part of what bone? Sphenoid bone. So this is the sella turcica here, and this is your pituitary gland. So I would say it's the gland that you see on the brain inside here. It's going to be on the anterior. Because the pineal gland is on the posterior surface of the diencephalon structure, or it's actually within the epithalamus. Pineal gland is back here, so it's more posterior. It's a smaller gland. It's P-shaped versus pituitary is a little bit bigger than the pineal. And then on this too, you also see the corpus callosum, what is the corpus callosum responsible for?
Communication between both.
Communication between hemispheres, yeah. I knew that's what you meant. So it's this big track of white fibers here. The brainstem, you have the midbrain is up in here. Pons is the next region down here, and medulla is here. I get a lot of complication on the labeling of the midbrain with students, so I try to label it If I label it way up here, it's going to be midbrain. If I label it kind of in the middle area here, kind of right across from the cerebellum, it's the pons. If I label it below the cerebellum, it's going to be medulla. So, and then on this picture too, you see the cerebellum, and like I said, in this section, the way it's cut in half like that, you can really see that arbor vitae, or the tree of life. That's not actually a structure, it's just an appearance. I've had that miscommunication before too, so. It just, when you section it, when you open it up, it looks like a tree of life or the arbor vitae. It's not actually, the structure is called arbor vitae. So anyways, this structure here is the cerebellum. It's the small brain. Alright, the spinal cord, have you guys had to label a lot of stuff on the spinal cord before? Was it on your last exam? I see you guys don't have, I don't think we have a model of it. So, there's good pictures though of it from either the lecture or this here. So, like I said, when you're looking at it, make sure you find this large groove, and that tells you it's the anterior or ventral surface. Anterior, ventral means the same thing. And then, so this side would then obviously be the posterior or dorsal surface. So that will help you say, if I have these nerve fibers here, that is actually called your posterior or dorsal root. I would highlight those, and you would label it posterior or dorsal root. You can use either way, you don't have to put them both on there. You can call it posterior root, you can call it dorsal root, whichever way. Just don't add some other term in front of it that's not on the list. So. And then just the opposite of that, the nerve fibers that come off of this here would be your anterior or ventral root. If you notice, you have this large area that's kind of bulging out here. It is called your posterior dorsal root ganglion. That's where you'd have certain fibers that actually synapse there. So the large bubble on the back side, so this is dorsal root. You only have it on the dorsal root, you do not have it on the ventral root. You might not be able to see it in this picture as well, but if you look through a couple different pictures, some pictures show it a little bit more than this one I think does. Unless it's just the lighting or on-screen appearance. You need to know the difference between gray matter and white matter. So the darker stuff is the gray matter, right? So some people call it the butterfly. Thing that looks like a butterfly, that's your gray matter. And then all the other stuff around it is your white matter. So all of this through here. Once those dorsal roots and ventral roots come together, they unite and they form your spinal nerve. And then that would exit out of the spine. The spinal nerve usually forms right as it's exiting the hole in the vertebrae, that intervertebral foramen. So as the nerve comes out of here, that's when it actually becomes the spinal nerve, because both ventral and dorsal roots are combined together to make that spinal nerve. Make sense?
Is that like T4?
Well, it comes out of every level. There's 31 spinal nerves that come out at there's one nerve that comes out at every level. 31 total nerves.
I think about this crazy.
Yeah. Alright, major nerves of the arm. It's upper extremity. What I would do is look for where their median nerve usually runs through the carpal tunnel. So I always look past the point where it's labeled and see where is it going to. Median nerve does first 3 fingers. So it's gonna do your thumb, index finger, and then middle finger. Whereas ulnar nerve runs on the ulnar side, so that's little finger side. So look, it will provide nervous tissue to the pinky finger and the ring finger. So if I have like, the nerve marked way back here or something like that, just make it easy on yourself. Look to where it's going. It'll probably be a better picture than this one so you can see a longer track of it, but I included these because I think you'll see them. Median nerve, the most common thing is carpal tunnel, but you can have other median nerve problems, but I think carpal tunnel is a very well known, most people know what it is. Ulnar nerve, you can have a lot of injuries to the ulnar nerve, hitting your funny bone, different problems with it, so you might see it. Radial nerve is usually, it will be on, or appear to be on like the top of the arm in this picture. This is the anterior side of the arm. But radial nerve mostly supplies the back side of the arm. So I'll find a better picture. So I'd say radial nerve, posterior aspect of arm, forearm. Median nerve, look for it to go through that carpal tunnel to supply the first 3 fingers. Ulnar nerve runs on the ulnar aspect of the arm and supplies the 4th and 5th digits. For the lower extremity, I just want you to know the big one, which is the sciatic nerve. So it's going to be on the back side of the body, and it's going to be coming down like this. Right about the knee, it will split off and divide, but in the upper thigh, this big nerve here is sciatic. All right. Again, the words in the bold are on the lab test. If there's other words on there, they're not bolded. It's just for your reference. So the muscles of the eye. I included this because I think it's important. What test do you use to test this? Do you remember?
To test what? Say
The muscles of the eyes. How do you test the muscles of the eyes? The H, kind of, yeah, the H pattern. So, yeah. So if you go down the H pattern like this, it will make, as you're moving that eye over following the finger, you're using certain muscles. So like this eye, when you're looking, it looks out laterally. You have to know the functions of the muscle to figure this out. But once you're going over like that, this eye here, the eye that pulls the muscle that pulls the eye out laterally is what? Okay. First of all, there's 4 rectus muscles. What does rectus mean? Anybody? Rectus abdominis? It means it runs straight. So you have 4 rectus muscles, and they're just named for their location. So top, so superior, you have 1 on the outside, so that's lateral rectus. You have 1 on the bottom, that's inferior rectus, and 1 on the inside of the eye, so that's medial rectus. So those are easy. The rectuses do what they're named for. So the lateral rectus will take it out laterally. So there's no memorization. Medial rectus takes it medially. Superior rectus takes it up. Inferior rectus takes the eye down. The obliques is what gets tricky. So you have 2 obliques. You have 1 on the top superior oblique that comes like this and like that to the eye. It's what attaches to that trochlea, kind of like a, yep, a pulley. Thank you, that's the word I was looking for. So that goes, with the obliques, they both make you look laterally. It's just, do they make you look up or down? And it's the opposite of their name. So superior oblique makes you look laterally down. And then inferior oblique comes and it makes you look laterally but up. So those are the obliques. are the ones you really have to remember versus the rectuses. Rectuses are straight. So forget this eye, just think about one eye at a time. When you go out like this with the H pattern, that eye is following it, so it's going out that way, it's looking out. And it might be hard too because I'm doing it backwards to you. So when you go over to the side, this eye is going out laterally, so it's lateral rectus. So if the eye doesn't follow, this eye doesn't follow, there's something wrong with lateral rectus or the nerve that innervates it. When you're looking at this eye, because both eyes are supposed to be following the finger, this eye is going inside, going medially, so it's the medial rectus on this side. So that's the purpose of the H pattern, and then you go up with it and you go down with it, and same thing over here. So that's the purpose of the H pattern, is to see. The other cool thing to see is, and you can try this out sometime. So doing the H pattern, some people, when they get out to the very end of it, their eyeball starts going like this. It's called nystagmus. It also occurs in people that are very intoxicated. So that's one of the things they look for if they are doing any sort of sobriety test. That's part of it, or could be part of it. And I've actually tried this out on somebody else, and because he was very intoxicated, and I had him do it, and I actually saw it. It was really cool, I have to say. So.
What causes that?
It has to do with, I don't know the exact mechanism, but there are ways to cheat the sobriety test too, because there is so much involved with the balance and equilibrium and coordination of it. So your body uses, the eyes, the ears, muscle control. I feel like I'm missing one too. There's like 4 different components to it. So I think though what causes the nystagmus isn't necessarily just the direct innervation of the nerve. I think it has to do with the control mechanism, which would probably be more brainstem based, or the basal ganglia, that kind of stuff.
So it has nothing to do with actual muscles, but just the signal.
No, but I mean, it can be, it doesn't just occur in that, it can be some sort of neurodegenerative disease. But I think it has to do more, not the direct processing of it, but the kind of modifying of that signal to the eye, or to the nerve that supplies the eye. Because I think it occurs in a couple different things, yeah.
My sister has pseudotumor.
What is it?
Pseudotumor,
Okay,
cerebri. So like excess spinal fluid
okay.
on her brain. And she noticed because she was having vision changes, because it was putting pressure on her optic nerves. But before they put the shunt in to drain, she developed nystagmus.
Mhm.
But once they relieved some of the pressure, like it slowly started to go away.
And I think there's different grades of nystagmus too, now that you brought that up, if I can remember back from neurology. So some nystagmuses just go, when you go out that far, it's an equal beat, and some will fatigue out. So you'll go out, and then there'll be a faster beat, and then it slows down. So there's different types of it there too.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Neurologists are smart people. Very smart people. So if you ever have a neurology class or a neurology educational seminar to go to, it can be like, oh man, that information's way over my head, but it can be kind of really interesting as well. To learn maybe a small part of the brain. Pretty cool. So those are the muscles of the eye. So to identify them, again, I always go through the rectuses first because they're the straight ones. The one on the top of the eye is superior rectus. You can't really see it well, but the one you can see the muscle here, that's inferior rectus. It's going to the bottom of the eye. This is the nose here. You can actually see the sinus cavities, so that would be your landmark of, is this medial or is this, lateral or whatever. So some actually have a better nose on them. So this would be the medial, so the straight muscle there would be medial rectus, and then this muscle would be lateral rectus. And then the obliques, again, the one on top, it's coming obliquely, and there's a trochlea right there. So what cranial nerve does the superior oblique? The trochlear nerve, which is cranial nerve 4. And then inferior oblique is coming at an angle to, you can pick up a part of it here. So the diagrams do have some of them on there, or just a piece of the muscle. They actually do have models that have the full muscle on it, but I don't think we have any of those here, so. But at least you can see some of them. Different structures of the eye. The lacrimal gland is here, so what, is this medial or lateral? Lateral. So you can always use that for reference if you need to. Sclera is the white of the eye. Sclera is this outer layer. It's continuous with the cornea. Back to this one, the pupil is the black hole or black space within that iris. Allows light to pass through, can get bigger, smaller, or the iris around it gets bigger or smaller. The iris is the colored part of the eye. We talked about cornea. So in the lecture I talked about those 3 different layers of the eye. So we talked about the outer one, that's the sclera and the cornea. That middle layer is going to be the ciliary body, which is all of this. The ciliary body, and then behind it would be the choroid. The ciliary body is important because that's what gives you those muscles. The muscle is closer here. Around it would be the ciliary body. But the muscles and then the ligaments that go to the lens, and that's what controls the shape of the lens to, put that image back on the retina where it needs to be. So, choroid, like I said, it's in the same layer as that ciliary body, so just follow that ciliary body back where you see a color change on the model, and that's the choroid. And then the innermost layer is going to be your retina, which is basically all the orange stuff here. This is all retinal. The lens, that should be an easy one. It's right here. Let's see if this other one. Can't see it on these pictures. Are you familiar with the fovea centralis? So there's an area in the back of the eye called the macula lutea, and in the center of the macula is the fovea centralis. It's the area of sharpest vision. So an easy way to actually find it, I don't think I can, okay. So an easy way to find it is you kind of go to the center of the opening of the eye in the front. You take your pencil and you go straight back, and that's the area of sharpest vision, and you'll land right on the fovea centralis. Usually on the models it's some area, and you can look at them. It's an easy area to see, but the fail-safe mechanism is to put your pencil, just don't mark up the model too much, but put your pencil or pen right through the direct center of it, and it will land right on that fovea centralis, the tip of the pen will. So it's the area of sharpest vision. So when you're looking directly at something, it's hitting that area. The optic nerve is the yellow structure. Nervous tissue is always yellow in the body or in manuals and things. So the optic nerve is the structure here. That's what's going to take that information, the image information, and take it back up to the brain. So that's the optic nerve or cranial nerve. Two. What sits in front of the optic nerve is called the optic disc. So if I have the yellow structure highlighted, you call it optic nerve. If I just have the very top of it highlighted, it's the optic disc. It's actually the blind spot of the eye. So there's no photoreceptors there, so it's your blind spot. Any questions on the eye? All right, the ear. The auricle is just the outer ear, so what you can see on yourselves. External acoustic meatus, from yesterday you talked about it, you saw the hole in the skull. So on the ear though, it's just the hole where where it enters. So here, it's opening through the ear. The tympanic membrane is actually what separates the outer ear from the middle ear. So it's this structure here, separates outer from middle. That's what vibrates due to the sound coming in. The three small bones that are in the middle ear are listed here, and that's what order they're in, starting at the tympanic membrane. So malleus connects to the tympanic membrane, and then that connects to incus, and that connects to stapes. You can also know them by this name, and I actually, in those other PowerPoint slides that I had of it, they went by this. I very rarely go by these, but I have them listed there for you. I always go by these. A way I remember what order they're in is they're in MIS, M-I-S, so malleus, incus, stapes, starting from tympanic. So you'll have to look at them on the model or on your computer. It's hard to point them out from, I have a hard time seeing them on this. So malleus, incus, and stapes. Stapes connects to what's called the oval window, which is going to be basically right on that vestibular cochlear complex. So that's what stapes attaches to. The auditory tube is the eustachian tube or nasal, what do they call it on here? They use a couple different names for it. It had to be like nasopharynx tube, pharyngotympanic tube is on there, so. I always learned it as eustachian tube, auditory tube, those are the more common ones, so. It's what connects the middle ear to the, where does it go to? Yeah, so the throat, pharynx. Alright, so we got those. That was just here's a blown up picture. It's kind of backwards though than what that diagram was showing. So here's your tympanic membrane, that whole structure there. So these are the bones then. You have your malleus, your incus, and then your stapes. And then that would be connected to the oval window. Inner ear, the semicircular canals, it's those things here, they look like semicircular canals. I don't think you need an extra description besides that. If you go back to this picture, there are these here. They have different names, anterior, posterior, and lateral, but you don't have to know that, just know that they're semicircular canals. And then the cochlea is the snail-shaped looking thing here. That's responsible for your hearing, whereas this structure here is more so balanced. But cochlea is the snail shell right here. And then vestibular cochlear nerve is the nerve, cranial nerve what? Number? 8. And that's what innervates that structure. Any questions? All right. So have at it. You can look at the model.